So the beautiful sunshine is here. I'm surrounded by wood anemones, and spring is definitely here, and I'm down on the secret campsite location of where I hold Singing with Nightingales, an event that started back in 2015 on the back of a little doc that I made celebrating the 90th anniversary of Beatrice Harrison and the BBC's first ever live broadcast. And it was really the making that little BBC doc that led me to create these experiences of bringing people into the woods to hear the birds and do as Beatrice did and play music with them and experience that phenomenal thing that happens when birds, nightingales and humans meet in the musical space, which is kind of much in question at the moment because of this curious admission by the BBC that it may have been that that first ever broadcast on the 19th of May 1924 didn't have a real bird, they say, but actually had a bird impersonator. And that's been kind of picked up as a kind of BBC fake news, that they faked it, and some accusations that it wasn't what it seemed. And I think it's a really curious thing because firstly, that's been a long time myth. It has never been confirmed. Beatrice Harrison never admitted it herself. We'll see what comes up in time to come. But it raises lots of really interesting points. And firstly, what that first broadcast was about. She had for a long time been playing with her nightingales. And this was a very, very experimental technological leap to try and get microphones out into the woods, into her house in Surrey. I've written quite extensively about it in my book, The Nightingale, and the whole piece about her genesis and how she came to the Nightingales and her life of what she created and the festivals and the annual gatherings that she did in her back garden for thousands of people and how she brought so much attention to nightingales. And what's really interesting is that very first night, the fact that they had a bird impersonator at hand, if that is the case, firstly, lets us into this kind of insight that actually there were people at the time who could do bird imitations, as there were many celebrated, famous mimics. The most famous being Charles Kellogg, of course, who sold records in their millions. And it was big business, and that's because we were so utterly entranced by birdsong. We needed to hear it, and at the time, recording birdsong to put onto wax cylinders or phonographs was a highly complicated thing with the old technology. So I see this as a piece of art, and the impact of which had over 1 million people globally listening to Beatrice's broadcast, and what turned into an annual repeating and the broadcasting of nightingales with her and then others right up until 1943 or 1944, where it stopped when the Lancaster bombers passed over the south coast and interrupted that broadcast, revealing a mission out to Mannheim. Very famous and powerful recording that is left. However, there's some doubt about this whole accusation because there is no recording made of that first one. We weren't in the habit of recording broadcasts, especially live broadcasts like that. Broadcasts were made later on for commercial purposes, of which she repeated the pieces that she played, the Chant Hindu and the Danny Boy theme, Londonderry Air, and other pieces, and they are very widely known. Their efficacy is, open to negotiation. Was it a real bird? Was it not? I think for me, the enchanting thing about this is that the authenticity of it at the time probably was of little interest. People weren't so bothered about, was it real, was it not real? Actually, it's the idea of being able to bring that medium of birdsong into one's home was so wonderful that that is what pushed through. There's a lot that I have to say, which I won't go into now, about what the impact of hearing that birdsong was. In brief, that here was a population who had moved quite recently, within a generation, from the country life to a very urban living, and had somewhat been divorced from birdsong. So the power of hearing a nightingale after many years, maybe decades, throughout the Industrial Revolution into the 1920s, to hear that song from their suburban homes would have been monumental. And I don't think we can ever really appreciate what the emotional response was to those who felt that great sense of disconnection from an older way of life and an older time. So I think our getting stuck on this, oh, the BBC, they faked this first thing, is actually us to miss the point of what the power of this broadcast was and what it did for bringing us closer back to birds, and not just birds, but nature and the song and sounds of nature. And I feel it's really important with that in mind for us to actually go, well, what is the real news? What is the real story here? That we're living in a time where actually within 40 years, which is a third of the time since that broadcast first happened, we're possibly going to see nightingales extinct from our country, from southern England, and nobody will be able to hear them without recordings, and creating that idea and the ability to go into woods, as I'm doing tonight and for the next several weeks, to listen to nightingales will be something deprived of future generations. That for me is a headline, not the fakery. I feel this is something that we're not talking enough about, and lest we have to return to the days of creating the nightingale effect for lack of the real species is something that deeply concerns me, and we should be putting all our energies into mitigating. So with that in mind, it's great that nightingales are in our minds and imaginations and our gossip right now, but let's go and hear the real thing and celebrate the birds now that they have returned back to the UK, and value them for their here and now and what they can teach us in their song today. Thanks for listening.